right, well, hi everybody. We are going to explore subtractive charcoal drawing this week. I have a couple of slides to show you, and then I'm going to go over this technique and talk a little bit about it with a demo video. Drawing with charcoal is interesting compared to other drawing materials in the sense that it can be pretty messy. It's got really kind of big particles. You kind of have less control over the material when you're drawing, but this is actually a good thing. I'll talk more about that here in just a bit, but when we work with the technique called subtractive drawing, what we're actually going to do is be adding a mid value of dark gray to your paper, and then you will actually use your eraser as a drawing tool, and then of course you can use your charcoal to add to areas that need more of a darker black of value to start bringing your subject matter to life on paper. I just have a few examples here of a few still lifes where the technique of subtractive drawing has been used. And again, you can kind of see, this one's a little bit blurrier, but you can see that there's been a base value established at the beginning of the drawing. And then in addition to adding value, there's value being added by subtraction with the eraser. And here's another example here of art supplies, and you can see that they've created a value scale here on the right side. But I think this is a really interesting approach to creating a drawing. We're almost always starting off with a white or very light piece of paper, and we only kind of experience drawing through adding all the different values, but subtraction can help you see light in other ways, or light values within a setting in other ways. And here's just examples of the figure being drawn with this technique. The other thing that I really like about the charcoal, like I said, it's bigger particles, you have less control, and what that can do is help you to loosen up how you're drawing. In the beginning, or before you take a drawing class, let's say, you kind of people think of great drawing as being able to render photorealistically on a piece of paper, but in ways that can be the most least interesting artwork out there, because it's the way that you as a human being interpret onto the paper that makes a particular rendered image interesting to look at. If, like for example, on this particular drawing, the way that the artist went and rendered out the skin with kind of a textured eraser of type of marks makes it exciting and gives this particular composition energy. And you can see here that the eraser was used in quick gestural marks to create value and visual interest in the rendering of the clothing, and the hair is a mixture of eraser and darker marks here too. And this particular figure, you can see that it's a human being, but it's the lack of precise detail and the way that the gestures have been made that make it very, it gives a mood and tone and emotion to it. Anyways, let's jump out of here and get into the demo video. I will have other videos posted of other instructors online kind of going through this technique as well. So you'll have lots of to check out. Okay, let me just try to get these situated. We could do like that. Okay, to start off with for this assignment, I suggest, you're gonna use a piece of your drawing paper. Here I had to cut one of my pieces of drawing paper down. These boards, I happen to have one of these. Probably none of you will have one of these boards. Maybe one of you. It's something that people typically have just laying around. But what you could do is, if you have like a piece of cardboard that your paper would fit on, I suggest using a technique where you tape the paper down too that you can draw on, because this will give you a border that you can kind of create with your drafting tape, and it kind of sits it down on a particular surface so that it's not moving around a whole bunch on you. You certainly do not have to do this, but this is the way that, this assignment is traditionally done. I just have my paper here and I'm taping off borders around the end, and I'll show you when I peel the artist tape off at the end how that kind of looks for the drawing. You can see here I've got my tape all down. What you most likely just picked up, charcoal that was a couple of bucks. Here's one type of vine charcoal that you may have picked up. And then I have just more of the traditional block charcoal. It's a little hard to see there. And, either one is fine. It doesn't really matter. Once you have your paper laid out, you can use this sort of smudge tool if you happen to have one of those. You probably don't, and that's perfectly fine, but if you happen to have them around, these are perfect. These are actually made for charcoal drawings for the most part. You can use them for pencils too. And then if you don't have one of those, that's perfectly fine. You will need some kind of tissue or paper towel to use to smear your initial layer of charcoal around. Okay, what I'm going to do here is just take my piece of charcoal and I'm just going to rub it throughout my piece of paper here. You don't need to do it super thick because the particles are big when they come off the charcoal that they really spread around quite a bit. You could just do like one. It kind of depends on your charcoal. Like charcoal is looser than others. The different brands have different ways that they compress the charcoal. It could be that your charcoal doesn't maybe spread as easily as this big of a chunk of charcoal here. The other thing that you are going to want to have are erasers, and I don't know if I picked those up. Yes, you can kind of use whatever eraser you have around. The eraser is going to get very dirty with the charcoal, but don't worry, you can just run your eraser under water and set that aside to try to get the charcoal off a little bit later. Okay, now that I have the charcoal all placed around, I'm going to take my tissues and I'm going to smudge around the charcoal to give myself a nice, fairly even of gray value of background. And you're going to see that parts of the original charcoal that got laid down leave this kind of textured chunk behind. But that's kind of a cool thing because now we've already got an established texture that's all over the paper, and that, that gives visual interest to what it is that you're drawing. For mine, I just had what I was sitting on my desk. I used this lava lamp and this little duck with a bow on it. And of course, I have all my wires in the background. You can just ignore those that I use to record these videos. But these are just going to be my examples here for today on this demo. Once you get your charcoal smeared around nice and even, you're going to just sort of start to map out the shapes. Now, I want to be very clear when I say the point of this assignment is to not do a photorealistic rendering of whatever it is that you choose to draw. You're going to choose a couple of objects sitting around your house that you think might be interesting to draw. The point of this assignment is to look at drawing in a different way using a subtractive process that is going to allow you to see how things can be rendered with actually very little detail and gestural marks. We're kind of, going back to like when we did gesture drawings earlier on in the term, you're learning to draw things in a way that are not perfect, that are not rendered perfectly or drawn. Well, I don't want to say aren't drawn well. That's not what I mean. I think that's what people maybe kind of think of when they see that has large gestural brushstrokes or marks. But anyways, the point here is to be looking at your objects and trying to replicate areas and patches of value from the photo that you're working from. I'm just going through, and I actually don't like exactly how I did these contour lines. There's no real rules on how to do this. I kind of drew out generic shapes as I got started here, And then I think I go back, and we'll talk about it in a minute, and kind of make them a little bit darker of a value here in just a bit. But anyways, what you're doing is you're zeroing in on areas and you're looking for value. I'm looking at the chunk of value here. Where's the light? Where's the dark? How can I use my eraser to replicate these areas of value? Think of it, it's almost like a value quilt that you're stitching together different patches of value to create a particular type of composition. I'm going to just go a little bit faster through this video here, and you can see I'm just going back and forth using my eraser, using my charcoal, and I'm patching in different areas of value that I'm seeing in these objects here, but I'm interpreting it in my own artistic way. Not the greatest drawing here, I would say, by me, but demos never really work that way. That's not where your great work comes out. Anyways, I want you to spend, an hour on this drawing. No less, but no more. And see how much you can render out and record these different areas of value for this particular drawing. Okay, and have fun with that charcoal. Yes, it's a mess. Don't wear white clothing. It can't, like, if it gets all over a white shirt, it may not come out. It is messy, but it's a nice, very traditional drawing material, and there's a lot of great results with the style, the visual style that you can achieve with it. Okay, now I'm going to show you, once you get done, you can go ahead and just peel that tape off, and you can see that it creates this nice border around the drawing. That is it. Like I said, I really want you to spend at least an hour on this drawing, and I am excited to see what you all come up with. Do make sure that you look at the other videos that I post for other examples of using this technique and method, and I look forward to seeing your drawings when you submit those. Okay, bye everybody. Let me know if you have any questions, of course.